And we have to look after our territory, and we have to look after our resources. And we also have to survive off of those resources. So First Nations developed along the coast of BC their own marine use plans. And that's where kind of the genesis of these marine protected areas started to come forward. You know, under this reconciliation era and the Oceans Protection Plan and the negotiation of the Reconciliation Framework Agreement, we're in a process with the federal government and the provincial government to design the Marine Protected Area Network. So when you start adding in the complexities around the ecology, the culture, and you start to look at some of the industrial development pressures that we might be facing in the next year to 5 years to 10 years, plus climate change and a whole bunch of uncertainties, it's really important that we examine that protection kind of issue really, really thoroughly, right from like fisheries management actions, right to the potential of complete closure and complete protection of certain areas.
We think it's a vital discussion to ensure that the biodiversity that exists on the west coast of Canada continues and gets stronger. But with that said, anytime you're locking down something, there's some concerns that come with that. For instance, in the Great Bear Rainforest on the terrestrial side, originally the province of British Columbia wanted to use the Park Act for all the conservancies in the Great Bear Rainforest. But our concern was the Park Act didn't acknowledge First Nations rights and title or opportunities for economic access to these protected areas. And so that's something we've learned going forward as we start to talk with the federal government about what marine protected areas would look like, is what are the mechanisms and tools going to be used? And so I think you're going to see further development of a framework that's going to bring more comfort to locking down something, but it's still going to protect and enhance a First Nations ability to access those areas, whether it be for cultural reasons, sustenance reasons. And so the more opportunity that we have to have these discussions before we tie it down in legislation, the stronger that protected area is going to be at the end of the day.
Co-development is definitely an extremely important part of this process. We have co-developed the reconciliation framework and the work around the network of marine protected areas with the First Nations. And I think it has the opportunity to serve as a model as to how this can be done in a thoughtful and collaborative way amongst all three governments, but also providing opportunities for significant input from other stakeholders who are interested in this conversation, such as commercial fishers, recreational fishers, and others. What is the content of a marine protected area? What does it mean to be a marine protected area? We are the first country, I believe, in the world to actually very explicitly set standards, including things like, in a marine protected area, there will be no oil and gas, there will be no bottom trawling, there will be no dumping, there will be no mining. So being very clear about the content of a marine protected area, which is just as important as the amount of space that we are protecting. And this has been co-developed. It will eventually be co-managed through the MPA network, and more broadly through conversations that are being held under the reconciliation framework around issues like marine spatial planning and others.
Well, this process is a great example of the path we're on with First Nations in BC around the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. It's a government-to-government approach between Canada, BC, and First Nations. It's a large coastal area that is connected ecologically. We know species migrate. We know people have relationships back and forth. So the ideal outcome is for people to come together and come up with a joint plan that everybody can get behind in order to support communities, in order to protect the marine environment, and in order to have sustainable economic development.
Luckily, we're not starting from scratch because we're building off a huge body of work that has gone into this, from the Pacific North Coast Integrated Management Area to the Marine Plan Partnership to all the fisheries management measures that are underway and all of the marine use plans built by First Nations people on the coast. We're talking about an area that's 102,000 square kilometers. So it's a huge area that encompasses so many different types of species and areas that are really important for biodiversity and for functioning ecosystems, as well as providing services to people. So we're talking about a huge area, a huge number of conservation priorities, and trying to do that in an efficient way that brings the best science to the table, that listens to people who have local and traditional knowledge on the water, that takes into consideration the users of the marine space so that we can create something that works for everyone, and also, ensures that we're protecting biodiversity for the future, for our children and our grandchildren. We're trying to do everything from protecting inlets to nearshore habitats to deep water sponges to areas that are important for spawning and migrating salmon to seabird colonies. I mean, you name it, we have it on the table.
So here we've got the Northern Shelf Bioregion planning space. We've talked about existing protected areas. If I go in and turn on some of these existing protected areas, so again, you can see we're not starting from scratch. There's a lot of conservation efforts in place. Again, these run a whole range of associated protection levels. Some are quite restrictive in terms of activities that are allowed to occur within at this time, and others are multiple use areas that allow a lot of activities, including a variety of commercial fishing activities. Previous initiatives have begun the process of compiling marine spatial data sets. There was the British Columbia Marine Conservation Analysis, the Marine Planning Partnership. Both of those worked to develop the database, the geodatabase of spatial data sets.
So with all of this in mind and with all of this foundation to work from, the first step in Marine Protected Area Network planning is to identify the things that you want to protect in the network. So species, the habitats, the features and areas of the marine environment that will help us meet our conservation goal of meeting and protecting biodiversity. We did this in a scientifically rigorous process with multiple input from experts outside of the process as well as within, and identified almost 200 species and 17 different types of areas and habitats that we want to ensure are represented in the Marine Protected Area Network.
There's a wide diversity in data sets representing different human use activities in the marine area for the Northern Shelf. There's commercial fishing catch data. There's recreational data for areas of preference or high value. There are data sets for different activities such as aquaculture, log storage and handling, facilities that use the marine environment, areas of importance for public rec activities. There's also vessel traffic data for large shipping activity.
When we talk about shipping on the North Coast, we are talking about operating in an incredibly unique ecosystem. It is unique not only to the nations that live on the North Coast of BC, but it is ecologically sensitive. And nobody doubts that. We have had some incidents on the North Coast of BC with respect to shipping, including the grounding of the Nathan E. Stewart only a few years ago. And these are close at mind to a lot of people involved in this process. So do we have to have difficult conversations about different commodities? Yes. Do we have to think and best understand how to mitigate those risks? Absolutely. And is there an easy and identified path to having those challenging discussions? No, but thankfully they're happening. Perhaps we're at the early stage of those discussions, but they are happening. Traditionally, in sort of the management of shipping in Canada, we've never really equated the commodities that the ships carry directly with the risk that they may pose from a navigational perspective and the impact ecologically, culturally, and socially. This is the first time in Canada that this is happening. That understanding of the ecosystem in which you operate in is crucial to being able to both plan your operations day to day, but also to plan your fleet operations and innovate into the future. And we're almost certain that this process and learning about the sensitivities of the BC North Coast will ultimately result in some sort of rerouting of some or all vessels. And we're not quite at that level of granularity yet, but we will need to get there in the next 12 months.
But somewhere around there, But yeah, see where it says 4.9 up here.
The MPA network technical team recognizes the vast knowledge base that the stakeholders hold, and that our ability to tap into that is important, and the resulting network will only get better if we can tap into that information effectively.
It gets fished off, like how many pounds comes off that little bed?
One of the exciting aspects of the CSketch online portal is that it enables the technical team to put the ability to plan into the hands of stakeholders.
It's an incredible tool for us. It's something that we couldn't have done 10 years ago. At the very beginning of the meeting, it's explaining to the fishermen why they're here, the importance of them being here, and what our process is. And then we can display the draft scenarios on the screen at the front of the room.
And when fishermen are introduced to that map, the first thing that they do is it strikes fear in fishermen.
And once the shock settles down with the fishermen, then we can sort of dig in and identify areas that are important to their livelihood and others in their industry.
We bring all of the fishermen together to do that work for the partners, for the governments, where first we do is develop a layer by fishery where we take each individual fishery, and there's 24 different fisheries affected in this Northern Shelf bioregion area, and we have them develop their own individual map so it minimizes the impact to their fishery while trying to achieve the ecological and cultural targets that are identified in the MPA network.
We understand these areas are designed to be a network of protection areas for a variety of objectives ranging from species to ecological and even cultural importance that extends even to reconciliation.
We were able to show the fishermen in real time, okay, here is a picture of the zone of cultural importance that the local band would like to protect. And they can sort of see, okay, well, yeah, we have to work within those constraints and respect their cultural priorities. They can use all of that information to help guide their decision making.
At the end of the day, there will be negative impacts, and they won't be equal across all 24 fisheries. Some will be hit harder than others. That's just the reality of the targets that they've identified that they want protection for. So our collective job is to try to minimize that and maintain as much viability as possible.
What we try and provide in the end is the most comprehensive maps with all the compromises of all those industry participants. Now let us be certain that we have access to those areas that remain so that we can scale the business to that, and future generations can see the benefit of that.
Our highest hopes are that this marine protected area network will act as a safeguard or a bank account for all of these different species and habitats far into the future. Ideally, we would like to see a whole network of strongly protected areas that continue to have lots of different species living in them that aren't impacted too much by human activities. We definitely take it very seriously in terms of the responsibility of ground truthing all of the information, making sure that we get the greatest net benefit to biodiversity and the species on our coast without impacting the people who live in these regions and are already making their livelihoods from the water.
We've got existing sites that we can adjust to better serve the network objectives. We've got the ability to look to new sites to add to the network, or we can look to some of these other areas that maybe don't meet the current definition of an MPA, but we can make adjustments such that they do. And I think in the end, it's going to be a combination of all those that end up serving the network overall.
The sport fishery in BC employs 9,000 directly through sport fishing, and affects small communities wherever there is access to the ocean. So the idea of having a network, having protected areas, that's a good and positive thing, and I'm proud to be a Canadian and be involved in that and all of those good things. At the same time, it's really imperative that we sort of get the balance right and properly, and that the stakeholders that are utilizing many of these areas that are being considered, their views and their use and their access is properly considered.
Tourism revenues are now outstripping all resource-based and extractive industries in the province. Tourism is the largest industry in British Columbia right now. And marine protected areas are so crucial to what we do in terms of protecting and managing the marine environment in a way that supports ecotourism. We're always heartened by a new provincial park or a new national park or a marine protected area. But it's so important for these pieces to be connected. We always talk about the downstream or the upstream effects of any activity, and if the salmon aren't there, the whales aren't there. And so it's great to set aside a little piece, but to have somebody looking at the bigger picture and somebody putting together all of the pieces of the puzzle from the economic perspective, the social perspective, and the ecological perspective being the utmost important. And we're doing our best to contribute to that.
This is the long game to help maintain the marine environment over the duration. So obviously adaptive management is a key consideration going forward as well once we get to the implementation stage. But the better we can set up the original design, we're that much further along at that point.
Our communities, especially smaller communities or remote communities like my community, Klemtu, is very dependent on the ocean for food. We base it around the seasons, when the salmon return, when the herring, the seaweed. So we're very dependent on the ocean for food. And we actually did a community needs study, and it came out that our community would need about 180 pounds of seafood per person per year to sustain themselves. We've watched a steady decline over the last 50 years, stories we've heard from our elders about how the resources were once abundant and now a lot of them don't exist, or a lot of them have gone downhill.
A food source that's been with the First Nations people forever. It's a food source that's healthy, and with the unemployment, they need that source from the sea to sustain them for the winter, them and their families. And especially this year, it's really been a totally disastrous year. And then with the fishing, the fishermen did not even make enough weeks for unemployment this year. So it's a really disastrous year that food fish is going to really sustain them. I did interview those First Nations commercial fishermen coming through the door in the summer and explained the MPAs to them. And they were very willing to sit with me and go over the maps and tell me their concerns. They were really happy that their voices will be heard. Like, I'm happy that you're doing this so that I can get my voice heard.
I just had a community meeting just a few days ago. One of the first questions we had is, how are we going to do things differently? And here is going to be our opportunity to implement some of our Indigenous laws, some of our conservation laws. We want to do it in a sustainable way. We don't want to do it the same way as other people have done for the last 100 years. And so I think this is going to be a very unique opportunity for us, and hopefully we'll have an opportunity to showcase to the world, what true conservation is and how to do it in the proper way.
All of the kids that grow up in the coastal communities hear from their parents and grandparents is that when the tide is out, the table is set, meaning once the tide recedes and the shoreline is exposed, there's opportunity to get out and harvest clams, chitons, mussels, our seaweeds, sea scallops. There's so many little creatures out there that you can harvest and have a good meal from. When we first engaged in this back in the mid-2000s, community consultation happened through door-to-door visits. Individuals were identified that were frequent harvesters of all species, and we did a lot of one-on-one interviews with a lot of the older haidas, middle-aged haidas, and young haidas that were experienced in harvesting, that identified the key areas that are set aside with certain protections that only allow uses for haidas to get in there and harvest specific species. So that's going to be key for our future generations to have the opportunity to harvest what's there set aside for us.
Okay, now cut right here. Cut that for me.
Shouldn't it be normal to be able to go and catch your food and prepare it and put it on the table and feed your family? Our people have protected a lot of land. You know, when we protect it, we keep it open for the use of cedar and the use of medicine. In the case of the marine, you go up into the north there today, you know, a stranger coming amongst us would say, it is amazingly rich, beautiful area. And yet, anybody who lives up there, you know, appreciates it, of course, but has seen the abundance and a steady decline since industrial fishing and, you know, logging on the land, wiping out creeks and that. Our primary function in this office and, you know, most of the First Nations is to look after the land, look after the water. And that way we look after the culture. To be able to look after ourselves after years of design dependency. You know, like it's not our fight, it's everybody's fight. If they keep dismissing it as an Indigenous fight, then what hope do we have? You know, like we're few people, you know, been fighting for a long time. It's, you know, like it's a big struggle. It's important to have some natural, marine, untouched regions just to have that baseline and to have the opportunity, like for rock cod and other things, you know, some kind of refuge for them. But you don't give up on this world, then. We won't.
They're huge challenges. We're trying to manage that kind of grand scale. There's power struggles inside of the sector between like big boat and small boat, and who has the resources to participate in these processes. There's conflicts between sectors. Aboriginal rights and title is a huge conflict on the coast. You know, it's never been resolved for the majority of British Columbia. How do you reconcile? You certainly want to build a relationship that our children can all work together on in the future. It's the opportunity to be sustainable, right? We have to push ourselves to do this. We have to build that foundation now, and working together in a collaborative way is one way forward. Working combatively in the courts is another way forward. We choose to work collaboratively, and that's what we're doing.
It's for everybody. It's based for whoever wants to come down the line. It's based on sustainable fisheries. It's based on science. It's based on coastal communities. It's like wearing seatbelts. You got to do it. You got to do it, you know? Wearing life jackets. I mean, sustainability and science go hand in hand, and the infrastructure we have in place here is here. The wheel is turning. Let's not stop this wheel from turning. It's a wheel that's maybe not be well greased at times, but it's there and it's working, I believe.
We're trying to tackle this at a scale that is unprecedented. We're not tackling a single habitat type or a single ecosystem. We're trying to do this at a scale that is unprecedented and with a governance system that is unprecedented. So it's really, you know, it's quite an undertaking. And the fact that we're all committed to it is pretty amazing.
And the intention is that the end results will be co-managed. In terms of financial resources that will be required, that's obviously something that has to get worked out through the process. And we're committed to ensuring that when we put in place a network of marine protected areas, that we do so in a way that they will be monitored, that they will be set up in a way to achieve the objectives that have been set for them. That's something that clearly we and BC and the First Nations want to ensure. I would say that does create some economic opportunities, particularly for the coastal First Nations, around some of the work like monitoring that we are going to have to do. And I think there's lots of good conversations to be had about implementation. So that at the end of the day, we end up standing side by side by side when we're able to announce where we're going.
We're at a reconciliation table. We call it Eichlstistut. It means, it's a Haystok word, and it means to turn things around and make things right again. And both the federal and provincial government have agreed to sit and negotiate with us on a whole bunch of things, including the marine sector. So I think that if the federal and provincial government are adamant to make change in their relationship with Indigenous people, then I think there's some really good opportunity for us to do some strong collaborative management decisions based on marine protected areas.
In a process that takes so many years and involves so much information and so many different steps, I think it's easy at times to lose track of the bigger vision, which is that we're all here to try to protect these very important, beautiful, unique places for our children and our grandchildren and generations to come.
I'm very happy to be a part of and be involved with and help to shape that. That's a tremendous legacy that those involved in the MPA process will hopefully be able to look back on with a great deal of pride.